Welcome back to the virtual hangar. Today we're going to make this super cute holiday decoration out of a pine cone. Your kit will include one regulation pine cone, one piece of red glitter felt, one piece of green glitter felt, one piece of faux fur. You may need to comb it. One wooden bead, one jingle bell, one bobbin of sewing thread, and one regular sewing needle. It'll also include 2 paper patterns. So we're going to start our project by cutting out all the requisite pieces. So we need to assemble the pattern piece. It's a little bit longer than the piece of paper. So we're going to do that by cutting out both of these 2 pieces of the pattern here. The image that's directly under the heading is just to show you how the pattern gets cut together. So once we have all of these pieces cut out, we are going to fold each piece along the fold line. That gives you a nice straight edge to align your 2 pieces here. And then you just line them right up and connect them with a regular old piece of Scotch tape. You could use a glue stick, whatever you happen to have on hand. We're just trying to get that lined up right, and then we're going to trim the excess off of our pattern, and I'm going to put a little extra piece of tape on the back just so it's nice and secure. And then we're going to repeat that process on the other sheet. The other pattern was for the body of the pinecone gnome. This one is for the hat. We're going to cut all of our pieces out and then tape them together, and then we are going to cut the pieces out on the felt. So on the wrong side of the felt without the glitter, we're just going to trace around our pattern with our pencil. It doesn't have to be perfect or exact because pine cones are not all going to be exactly the same shape. And once we have our pattern traced, we are just going to cut it out with a regular old pair of scissors. And then there is our body piece. And now we're going to do the exact same thing for the hat. Fit it as best as you can. It probably won't be perfect. And again, just trace it. You can trace pretty dark with your pencil. Just make sure you do it on the side that doesn't have the glitter, and it'll get hidden once we sew it all together. All right, so with a little movie magic, that's pretty quick. And once you've got it cut out, you can see how if you kind of roll it onto itself, that's how it's going to make that nice cone-shaped hat. So first things first, we are going to thread our needle. I cut a piece of thread just about 2 feet long. You can always cut more, but you don't want it to get tangled. And you guys know how I like to thread my needles. You go all the way through one side and pull the 2 tails even and then just tie it in an over knot. So we're really sewing everything with 2 threads. So before we start sewing, it's a good idea to take that body piece and measure it around the pine cone so you can kind of get an idea of how the 2 ends overlap. If it's a lot, you may need to trim your little piece down. I'm going to just take our faux fur here and kind of round the top corners. You can see the bottom where it hangs down. You can tell the direction of the hair is basically you want it to look like a beard, right? So we're going to take our sewing needle and start the back. And the advantage of that 2 thread technique is that you don't just pull the thread all the way through both pieces. If you leave a little bit before you pull your thread tight and you hook your needle in between the knot, that makes the beginning of your sewing nice and secure. And we're just going to whip stitch this all the way across the top, which just means we're going to continually go from the back to the front until it's nice and securely attached. I'm going to use a little movie magic, make that go a little bit faster. It is just a decoration, so it doesn't have to be, industrial strength. But once you get to the end, you're just going to tie a little knot to finish it off. I always double knot because I'm always worried that a dog is going to get a hold of it. Trim it and then tie another overhand knot so that your thread is ready for the next part that we have to sew. So now, because we checked how this wrapped around the pine cone, we know that it needs to overlap about 1 inch to get a nice fit around that pine cone. So we're just going to connect this kind of cylinder shape with a nice cross stitch down the back. It's not necessarily, again, going to be under any stress, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go crazy with the amount of cross stitches. You're just attaching it around a pine cone. But I do like to hook the needle through the thread just to secure it a little bit better. Having a little difficulty starting this cross stitch here. There we go. And again, it's not, home ec that you're getting for a grade. Just kind of make your stitch look like an X. It doesn't matter if you always start from the same exact corner and go to the other side. You know, if your X's go in a little bit different decorations, it just looks homemade, and I think that looks really nice around the holidays anyways. So once you are down on the other end of your pine cone there, you get all the way to the end of this little cuff. Just go ahead and finish up. Make sure that it fits nice in your pine cone. You're going to wrap the remaining thread around the pine cone and then kind of tack it into the bottom of the felt there. That's how I actually finished my last stitch. So then once you do that, that keeps the cuff on the pine cone. I just tie it in a knot, hook it as best as you can. There's not really any sort of method there. It's supposed to look kind of, you know, handmade. So I just tie a couple knots, and then once I get those knots tied, I just cut the string, and then we move on to the next part. So there's our bottom, our pine cone cuff around the body. That's our body of our gnome. So I am going to take the rest of this thread here and go on to making the hat. So to do this, we are going to do the same thing we did for the body. You're just going to overlap it by about 1 centimeter and then cross stitch all the way up the hat. Same thing here. We want to catch our thread over the needle so that the loop that's made by the 2 strings that are tied together, you just want to catch it so that you don't have to worry about tying a big enough knot that it would not be pulled through the felt. Once you get those cross stitches started, again, it doesn't matter. They don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do them all exactly the same. No one's going to see the inside. So you're just kind of attaching it in like a cutesy, folksy way. This can be a little difficult because of the shape of the cone, but just do your best. You can kind of squeeze it because it's felt, so you can kind of just scrunch it up to get your hand in there if you need better access with the needle. And then get to the end. This project would also work if we had done embroidery thread. So if you would rather do that than just regular sewing thread and you have an embroidery needle and you have some thread, it'll work exactly the same, and you might be able to see it a little bit better, and it'll be easier to thread that needle as well. So once we get up to the top of our hat cone here, we should have a little bit of thread left, and then we are just going to attach our jingle bell in kind of the same whip stitch fashion. I just gave this a good series of go-arounds here just to get that really attached to the tip of the cone here for the hat. So again, just make sure it's not terribly tangled. Go through the hook there on the edge of the jingle bell, and I just gave it like 6 or 7 go-rounds and then tied it off in a simple overhand knot. If you wanted to get fancy, you could bring your thread to the inside of the cone, but it's so steep of a cone that it would be pretty difficult. So I just tied a knot here, and I'm like, well, no one's going to look at it that closely. So just make sure it's nice and secure. Give it a good trim with some scissors, and then we are ready to put it all together. Pretty simple there. All right, we're almost done here. So I just attached my thread from the back, and I go from the back to the front, just to the right of center of the beard. We are going to attach the wooden bead for the nose. So you just go in one side, go out the other, and then push your needle back into the fabric about the distance of the bead, the width of the bead. You can go a little bit less, and that'll just keep it more secure. It'll be a little fiddly. You might have to fight with it. But I ended up going through the fabric a couple of times just to make sure that the bead isn't going to accidentally fall off if like one of the threads break. I did a little whip stitch here after the first pass just so I didn't have to keep fighting. The gravity of that bead is going to be a lot heavier than the natural width of the thread there, so it's going to be a little bit of a pain, but not terrible. And then if you want to also wrap the thread around the tip of the pine cone a couple times, that's just going to make sure that this felt cuff doesn't come off every time you go to pick this up and put it in your seasonal baskets that you keep. You know, we have those tubs we keep in the attic that we only get out in December. So you just have to make sure that it's secure enough that you're not like, what's this weird loose felt and this weird loose pine cone? Oh yeah, it's that thing I made. So I just try and like wrap the thread around the cone anytime I can. So once you got the bead nice and securely attached there, I just tie a couple more knots. And then we are just about onto the last step here. I'm going to just give that a little trim. And then same thing, I'm just going to test the fit of the hat there. He's looking good. I'm going to thread another needle because I was out of thread. And same thing, just hook it through so you're catching that loop instead of just trying to tie a big knot. And we're just going to really tack this in place. So what that means is as I'm going up the back and as small as I can, I'm just going almost back through the exact same hole because we don't necessarily want this stitch to show. We just want it to be there to attach. And then I'm doing the same thing on the other side of the nose to get the front of the hat nice and square on there. Just a little tack. And then once I've got that attached, I'm going to do the same thing on the back side so that the cone stays nice and tight on his little body. And it'll kind of naturally tip towards the back because of the bead in the way. I even think I do this one, I cheat it a little bit by going through the back seam there to tack the hat onto the back here. And then once you've got it done and tacked, and you can be as aggressive about this as you want. If you wanted to cross stitch all the way across the bottom of the hat, I think that might look cute too, but it would probably be a little difficult just logistically, but it would be really cute. Once you've got that nice and attached, you're confident that the hat is going to stay on even in your winter tubs, your winter storage tubs. Just go ahead and tie a nice knot, and then after you get that tied off, trim your thread, and then just tuck it up into the hat. No one will ever see it. It'll be great. So it looks a little funky while everything's getting tightened up, so just straighten them out. And if you wanted, you could even, cheat this last step and plug in your hot glue gun and hot glue the hat to the pine cone. But that is really all there is to it. I am in love with these gnomes. I would love to see yours. Please contact us on social media if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.